The walls of Westminster are trembling, not from protesters, not from political rivals, but from Buckingham Palace itself. In a rare and chilling intervention, King Charles has issued a fierce warning to Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the Labour leadership. This isn't a ceremonial statement or polite royal suggestion. This is a direct, forceful alarm over what the Crown sees as a coordinated, quiet betrayal of Brexit. Yes, the anti-Brexit plot that many dismissed as a conspiracy is now unfolding in plain sight. And the monarch, typically silent and above politics, has decided that enough is enough. What Starmer is orchestrating behind closed doors, under the guise of diplomacy and pragmatism, could dismantle the very sovereignty Britain fought for. And now, the king has entered the arena. It started with whispers, rumblings from inside. The palace that the king was growing uneasy with Labour's rapid moves toward Brussels. But now, those whispers have become undeniable. Sources close to senior royal aides confirm that King Charles has conveyed strong concerns to government officials over the direction Keir Starmer is steering the nation. The king's warning is not just symbolic, it is historic. In modern British politics, the monarch almost never intervenes in the day-to-day business of governance, but this, according to insiders, is no ordinary moment. Starmer's quiet march toward European alignment has crossed a line, and now, the man whose role is to protect the unity and constitution of the United Kingdom is sounding the alarm. Starmer's government has made no public declaration about rejoining the EU, but actions speak louder than words. Behind closed doors, Labour officials are pursuing policies that echo the exact conditions Brexit was meant to escape from. They are preparing agreements on food standards, regulations, youth mobility, and defence cooperation with EU bodies. These are not minor tweaks. These are foundational shifts that would gradually tether Britain back to Brussels. One diplomat described it as Brexit in name only, and the king has noticed. Reports indicate that His Majesty sees these moves as undermining not only the referendum result, but the democratic foundation of the country. Because what Starmer is doing is not just political, it's constitutional. It's a reversal of the people's will, cloaked in quiet compliance. This fierce warning from the king did not come lightly. Charles, like his mother before him, has always treaded carefully in matters of state. But this moment, according to palace insiders, has become a matter of national integrity. He is said to be concerned not only about the direction of travel, but the secrecy, the lack of consultation, the absence of parliamentary transparency. Key elements of these EU deals are being crafted away from public view. Documents are being drawn up with vague language, offering cooperation without limits, alignment without accountability. And while Starmer's inner circle reassures, the media with empty sound bites about resetting EU relations, the palace is preparing for a constitutional storm. Labour's reaction? Denial, as usual. Spokespersons downplay the reports, calling them exaggerated. But something doesn't add up. If everything was above board, why the secrecy? Why the backdoor meetings with EU commissioners? Why the sudden shift in tone from respecting Brexit to common frameworks and shared governance? It's because Labour knows the truth would ignite outrage. The British people were promised independence, sovereignty, and full control. But what's taking shape now is a quiet, creeping surrender, and the king knows it. Meanwhile, tensions inside Whitehall are rising. Senior Conservative MPs have reportedly approached the palace, expressing their own concerns. Some have urged the monarch to address the nation if things continue down this path. While that remains unlikely, the mere fact that such an idea is being floated speaks volumes. This isn't just about party politics. This is about the soul of the nation. The king, bound by duty to remain neutral, is watching as Starmer gambles with Britain's independence. And now, he's decided to push back. There are even murmurs that royal advisers are exploring options to formally express the king's views through constitutional channels, quietly but firmly. This could mean private briefings with ministers, diplomatic communications, or public speeches that make his position clear without direct confrontation. Make no mistake, if Charles escalates his warning, it will be unprecedented in the post-Brexit era. But given the stakes, silence is no longer an option. And what of the people? They're starting to see through the smokescreen. Reform UK is gaining traction. Nigel Farage is back, louder and sharper than ever, warning that Starmer is betraying Brexit through stealth. Recent local elections sent shockwaves through Labour's base as voters rejected their pro-EU shift and turned to reform in large numbers. The message is loud and clear. The public will not be fooled by polished speeches and photo ops. The aye. British people voted to leave, and they expect their leaders to honour that vote, not undo it behind closed doors. But Starmer, emboldened by his standing in the polls, is pushing forward at full speed. His strategy: pretend nothing is happening, stay quiet, sign quietly, and hope the media doesn't dig too deep. But now, with the king watching, with the public waking up, and with reform surging, that strategy is collapsing. The warning has been issued. The clock is ticking. And the next move could change the course of British history. What's unfolding behind the scenes isn't just a policy shift. It's a silent escalation, a systematic erosion of British sovereignty masked as cooperation. Keir Starmer, who once positioned himself as a reluctant Remainer, is now orchestrating what many are calling the soft re-entry into the European Union, not through bold declarations or official treaties, but through a methodical, quiet alignment of the UK's legal, regulatory and economic frameworks with Brussels. These developments are not being debated in Parliament with the transparency one might expect. Instead, the process is occurring in hushed backrooms through non-binding agreements, memorandums of understanding, and vague press statements that offer little clarity but carry enormous constitutional weight. The public sees one thing: calm, diplomatic handshakes and carefully chosen words like collaboration and mutual interests. But beneath the surface, policy architects are stitching together a new relationship with the EU that bears striking resemblance to the very structures Brexit tore down. One of the most alarming components is the push for regulatory alignment on food and agricultural standards. This may seem technical or even harmless, but the implications are profound. By adopting EU rules, the UK essentially concedes its ability to legislate independently in critical sectors. It's a move that hands power back to European technocrats, sidelining British farmers and industry leaders who have long fought for freedom from the red tape of Brussels. But this is just the beginning. Another element of Starmer's stealth. Plan is the proposed youth mobility scheme, which on the surface appears benign. An exchange programme, a cultural bridge between British and European youth. Yet in reality, it mirrors the very freedom of movement that ignited the Brexit referendum. By disguising mass migration as temporary exchange, Labour is reintroducing one of the most controversial and divisive elements of EU membership. This plan, critics argue, is an open door dressed as a student visa. It would allow thousands of young Europeans to live and work in the UK with minimal oversight, a backdoor policy with permanent consequences. The European Court of Justice is also being invited back into British legal affairs under the guise of cooperative dispute resolution. This is perhaps the clearest sign that Labour is ready to cede judicial independence. Brexit was, at its core, a declaration that British laws should be made and judged by British courts. Now, under Starmer's leadership, that foundational principle is being quietly dismantled. The European Court will not only influence trade and regulatory disputes but potentially weigh in on civil matters that touch the lives of ordinary Britons. Once jurisdiction is conceded, sovereignty becomes ceremonial. Defence is yet another front where Starmer's strategy is drawing serious concern. Britain's participation in the EU's common security and defence policy is expanding. Financial. Contributions are being negotiated, joint operations discussed, and intelligence sharing protocols reviewed. While this may be framed as a pragmatic partnership, the underlying issue is control. The UK would be committing resources and personnel to projects governed by EU priorities, not British national interest. It's a move that many military analysts see as compromising operational independence, and one that echoes the EU's long-term ambition for a unified military identity. All of these actions form a pattern, a reweaving of EU ties so comprehensive that formal membership may eventually become a formality. Labour's intent seems to be to prepare the groundwork, normalise EU involvement in every aspect of governance, and then, when the public is sufficiently softened, make the final leap. This calculated approach explains why there's been no referendum, no vote, and no clear debate. Starmer is avoiding the democratic process because he knows the outcome. He knows that, if asked directly, the British people would reject rejoining the EU in any form. So instead, he's choosing manipulation over mandate. And yet, amid all this, the media remains curiously silent. Only a handful of independent outlets are exposing the truth. The BBC, once a guardian of British public interest, appears content with broadcasting puff pieces and ceremonial coverage of EU events. The mainstream press is either unaware or unwilling to confront the magnitude of what's happening. But the silence won't last forever. Reform UK is growing louder, the public is growing restless, and now even the monarchy is beginning to stir. The next few months will determine whether Britain stays free or slips quietly back under Brussels' shadow. The silent escalation is underway, and it's time to break the silence. In a political climate where silence often signals complicity, the voice of the monarchy carries unmatched weight. For decades, the British Crown has stood as a symbol of unity above partisan squabbles, never interfering directly with government affairs. But what we're seeing now is unprecedented. King Charles, bound by duty to remain politically neutral, is reportedly stepping closer to the constitutional line than any monarch in recent memory. Sources close to Buckingham Palace suggest that the king has grown increasingly alarmed by the creeping reversal of Brexit, so much so that private messages and subtle signals are now being interpreted as royal disapproval. This isn't idle gossip. It's a quiet roar echoing from the walls of Windsor. And it could change everything. Traditionally, royal intervention is reserved for moments of grave national concern. Wars, constitutional crises, or severe threats to the monarchy's relevance. But as Starmer steers the UK toward deeper entanglement with the EU, the palace appears to see this as no less dangerous. This is about more than politics. This is about the survival of Britain's constitutional order. The unease isn't rooted in party allegiances. Rather, it reflects a deeper fear that the will of the people is being undermined by a political elite intent on reversing the most consequential vote in British history. For a monarch who inherited the throne in the aftermath of Brexit and promised to be a unifying figure for all Britons, watching that democratic mandate unravel poses a serious challenge. Insiders have pointed to the King's increasing involvement in state briefings concerning foreign policy, something usually delegated to senior advisers and ceremonial audiences. His Majesty has also made pointed remarks during recent engagements about the importance of sovereignty and national identity, words that, in today's climate, carry heavy political undertones. While these statements are carefully worded, seasoned observers detect their meaning clearly. They are not coincidence, they are warnings, not shouts, but whispers meant to be heard in the corridors of power. The royal household's unease reportedly intensified in the lead-up to the May 19th UK summit. While Downing Street was celebrating the event as a diplomatic success, palace officials were quietly voicing concern over the summit's true objectives. Leaks indicate that senior members of the royal staff were briefed on the sweeping implications of proposed agreements, particularly those relating to shared defence structures and judicial cooperation. The King is said to have questioned the speed and secrecy of the negotiations, as well as the lack of parliamentary scrutiny. And while it is unconstitutional for the monarch to block or veto policy, the very act of raising concern behind closed doors is sending ripples through Whitehall. Constitutional scholars are now debating the implications of a more vocal monarchy. Some argue that this signals a breaking point, an unofficial constitutional crisis in which the monarch feels compelled to act as a safeguard for national integrity. Others fear that it risks politicising the crown, pulling it into the very conflicts it has long transcended. But the reality is simpler. The king is reacting not as a political player, but as a steward of a nation that appears to be veering off course. And unlike ministers who can be voted out, the monarch bears the long-term responsibility of continuity and national heritage. The symbolism here cannot be overstated. In British history, moments when the Crown has chosen to signal displeasure, even subtly, have often precipitated significant political shifts. Whether through back-channel influence or ceremonial presence, the monarchy holds a unique power to shape national mood. And right now, that mood is darkening. The British people are sensing that something is deeply wrong. With Reform UK gaining ground and traditional parties facing backlash, the Crown's emerging role could act as a moral compass in a time of institutional drift. If Starmer and his team hope to move quietly, avoiding public scrutiny and bypassing resistance, they may now find themselves facing a far greater force than political opposition. They're facing history. They're facing a nation that remembers its sovereignty was hard won. And now, with the King's gaze fixed on Westminster, the stakes have never been higher. Britain may soon have to choose between silent surrender or sovereign survival. The King has spoken, not with speeches but with signals, and Britain, whether it's ready or not, must now decide how to respond. As Britain stands on the edge of a crossroads, the time for silence is over. We, the people, must remain vigilant. If you believe in the sovereignty of this nation, if you believe that the voices of 17.4 million voters still matter, and if you believe that power should never be handed back to Brussels through the back door, then now is the moment to act. Share this video with your friends and family. Let them see what's truly happening behind the polished press conferences and sugar-coated soundbites.